Two brothers grew up under the same roof. Same parents, same schools, the same opportunities. They even followed similar career paths and earned almost identical salaries throughout their working lives. But by age 65, their lives looked completely different. One brother retired with $1.4 million invested, a fully paid-off home, and total financial freedom. He spends winters in Arizona, helps his grandchildren with college tuition, and never thinks twice about the price of dinner at a restaurant. The other brother reached retirement with $180,000 in savings, a mortgage with 12 years left, and constant financial stress. He works part-time at a hardware store because Social Security alone isn't enough to cover his bills. At night, he lies awake doing mental math, trying to figure out whether he can afford both his medications and his property taxes. Same genetics, same upbringing, same earning power. Yet their futures turned out completely different. And the most surprising part is when that difference happened. It wasn't during their 20s when both brothers were still figuring out life and had little money to work with. It wasn't in their 30s when they were both building careers and raising families in similar ways. And it wasn't their 50s when most of their financial trajectory had already been set. The turning point happened almost entirely during one decade, their 40s. During those 10 years, each brother made a series of decisions that seemed small at the time. Nothing dramatic, nothing obviously life-changing. But those decisions quietly shaped the rest of their lives. Neither of them realized it in the moment. But the choices they made during that decade determined what their retirement would look like decades later. Your 40s are likely the most financially important decade of your entire life. Not because the decisions are more difficult than in other stages of life, but because the consequences of those decisions grow exponentially. And most people don't recognize the stakes until it's already too late to change course. In this video, I'm going to show you why your 40s matter so much financially, the specific decisions that separate comfortable retirement from financial stress, and what you can start doing today, no matter your current age, to make sure you land on the right side of that divide. To understand why this decade is so powerful, we need to look at the mathematics behind it. Your 40s sit at the intersection of three powerful financial forces that almost never align at any other point in your life. And when those three forces overlap, they create an opportunity that can dramatically shape your financial future. The first force is peak earning power. For most professionals, income tends to reach its highest level somewhere between the ages of 42 and 55. The raises that once felt exciting in your 30s often slow down or stop entirely. But the total dollars you're earning are higher than they've ever been, and higher than they may ever be again. That means your 40s are often the years when you have the greatest financial capacity to build wealth. A 45-year-old earning $120,000 can usually save more in real dollars than they could at any earlier point in their career. The second force is remaining time for compounding. At 40 years old, you still have roughly 20 to 25 years until traditional retirement. Historically, that's enough time for invested money to quadruple in value. A dollar invested at 40 could grow to roughly $4 by age 65. But by 50, the timeline shrinks to about 15 years, and that same dollar grows to around $2.50. By 55, with only 10 years left, it may only double. Each passing year dramatically reduces the power of compounding, which means your 40s are the last decade where long-term compounding can still work at full strength. Money invested at 42 has far more time to grow than money invested at 52. The third force is something many people overlook: expense stabilization. By the time you reach your 40s, many of life's biggest expenses have already peaked. Children become more independent. The house you stretched to afford in your 30s begins to feel manageable. Your work wardrobe is already built. The furniture is already bought. For the first time in many people's lives, expenses stop expanding in every direction, and that creates something extremely powerful: margin. Money that could either be invested or slowly absorbed by a more expensive lifestyle. Your 40s are the decade when these three forces align. Your income is near its peak. You still have enough time for compounding to matter. and your expenses finally stabilize. That combination creates an extraordinary window for wealth building. The people who recognize this alignment and take advantage of it often build significant financial security. The people who miss it face a problem that becomes almost impossible to fix later. Because once that decade passes, the mathematics become much less forgiving. Now let's look at the actual numbers that reveal just how powerful this decade can be. Imagine someone turning 40 years old with $100,000 already saved for retirement. They earn $110,000 per year, which means saving 15% of their income, about $16,500 annually, is realistic. If they consistently save that amount from age 40 to 65 and invest in diversified index funds earning roughly 8% per year, their retirement account would grow to around $1.35 million. Add Social Security to that, and they're looking at a retirement that's not just stable but comfortable. But now imagine a slightly different path. Instead of saving 15% during their 40s, they save only 5% throughout that decade. Then, when they reach 50, the reality of retirement begins to feel much closer. So they increase their savings rate to 15% and maintain that level until retirement. The result? By age 65, they accumulate about $780,000. That's $570,000 less, even though they reduced their savings for only 10 years. Why such a massive difference? Because the money invested in your 40s has 25 years to grow, while money invested in your 50s only has about 15. Time itself becomes the multiplier, and once that time is gone, no amount of extra saving can fully replace it. Now consider an even more common scenario. Someone reaches 40 with the same $100,000 saved, but instead of maintaining their savings rate, they decide to enjoy the rewards of their career success. They upgrade their house, they buy nicer cars, they take more expensive vacations. Their retirement contributions during their 40s drop to around 2% of income. Then at 50, reality hits. Retirement suddenly feels much closer than it did before. They panic and start saving aggressively, maybe 20% of their income for the next 15 years. Even with this aggressive effort, by age 65, they end up with roughly $590,000. Compared to the consistent saver, their more comfortable 40s cost them around $760,000 in retirement wealth. One decade of decisions created a gap that another decade of discipline simply couldn't close. So what exactly are the decisions that shape this outcome? Let's walk through the ones that matter most. The first, and often the most expensive, involves housing. Your 40s are when many people feel the strongest urge to upgrade their home. The kids are getting bigger and need more space. Your career has advanced, and you want a home that reflects your success. And with your income at its peak, the mortgage payments seem manageable. But this single decision may be the most financially significant choice you ever make. Imagine a family upgrading from a $350,000 home to a $600,000 home. That upgrade can easily increase housing costs by $1,500 to $2,000 per month. That's roughly $18,000 to $24,000 per year that can no longer be invested. Stretch that difference across 25 years, and the lost investment growth becomes staggering. That extra housing cost can quietly erase $900,000 to $1.3 million in potential retirement wealth. In other words, the home upgrade doesn't just cost more each month. It can cost over $1 million in future financial freedom. This doesn't mean nobody should ever buy a larger home, but most families make this decision without understanding the true long-term price. They think they're spending an extra $1,800 a month on housing. In reality, they may be trading away over $1 million of future security. Families who stay in their modest home and invest the difference end up creating options that others never have. They may retire earlier. They might work part-time instead of full-time in their 60s. They can help their children buy homes. And when financial emergencies appear, they face them with stability instead of panic. The second major decision involves vehicles. Your 40s are often when practical cars get replaced with something more impressive. The reliable sedan becomes a luxury model. The dependable SUV gets replaced by something newer and more prestigious. A household driving two $45,000 vehicles instead of two $28,000 vehicles carries roughly $34,000 more in auto debt, along with higher insurance costs and more expensive repairs. Over time, that vehicle upgrade can quietly reduce retirement wealth by $200,000 to $400,000, depending on how often cars are replaced. Then there's the third major decision: children's lifestyle and education. Your 40s often include the most expensive years of raising kids. Teenagers need cars, insurance, sports activities, and eventually college tuition. Some parents take out Parent Plus loans exceeding $100,000 to send their children to prestigious universities. Others withdraw money directly from retirement accounts. And some families simply pause retirement contributions altogether during the college years. Each of these choices shifts financial resources from the parent's future to the child's present. Meanwhile, the children graduate into the strongest earning years of their lives, with decades ahead of them to build wealth. But the parents enter their 50s with depleted savings and far less time to rebuild it. The problem is that by the time parents reach their 50s, the financial damage is often already done. Savings have been drained, retirement contributions slowed or paused, and there may be barely 10 years left to rebuild. Families who manage this stage successfully usually make decisions that feel uncomfortable in the moment. They encourage their children to attend state universities or schools offering scholarships. They expect their kids to contribute through part-time work or student loans. And most importantly, they continue funding their retirement accounts even when college bills create intense pressure to stop. Because once retirement savings are interrupted during this decade, it becomes incredibly difficult to recover. But financial outcomes in your 40s aren't only shaped by spending decisions. Another critical factor is career risk tolerance. Your 40s often present opportunities for career moves that could dramatically increase your income. A competing company might recruit you for a senior leadership role. A startup might offer equity with long-term upside. An emerging industry might value your experience enough to pay a significant premium for your skills. Yet ironically, this is the decade when many people become more risk-averse than ever before. They've built comfort and seniority in their current position. They know the people. They understand the systems. The paycheck feels reliable. The idea of leaving that security to start somewhere new suddenly feels intimidating. But the truth is that your 40s represent the final window for meaningful income acceleration. Once you move into your 50s, hiring discrimination begins to quietly limit opportunities. The person who takes a calculated career risk at 43 still has time to recover if things don't go as planned. The person who waits until 53 often doesn't. And the financial difference between staying comfortable and pursuing growth can be enormous. An additional $30,000 to $40,000 per year in income may not seem dramatic in isolation, but over 10 years, that translates into $300,000 to $400,000 in extra earnings, money that could significantly accelerate retirement savings. Then there's the fifth decision: lifestyle inflation. Your 40s come with subtle but powerful social pressure to display success. Colleagues begin taking elaborate international vacations. Neighbors remodel kitchens and add luxury outdoor spaces. Friends purchase boats, second homes, or expensive hobbies. At this stage of life, it can feel like everyone around you is leveling up. Some families quietly resist this pressure. They maintain the same lifestyle that felt comfortable in their late 30s. Others allow their spending to expand alongside their income, absorbing every raise into visible upgrades. Over the long term, the retirement difference between these two approaches often exceeds $1 million. To see how these decisions compound over time, consider two couples. Let's start with David and Christine. They married in their late 20s, and by the time they turned 40, their life looked fairly typical. They had $185,000 saved for retirement. They owned a modest home valued at $320,000 with about $180,000 remaining on the mortgage. And they were raising two children, ages 12 and 9. Their combined income had grown to $165,000 per year. Like many families entering their 40s, they faced a series of decisions about how they wanted their next decade to look. David believed it was time to upgrade their home. Christine hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. The new home increased their monthly housing expenses by $1,650. To make room in the budget, they reduced their retirement contributions from 15% of income down to 6%. It's only temporary, they told themselves. 2 years later, David's car began having mechanical issues. Instead of repairing it, they decided it was time for something nicer. After all, he had worked hard for years. The new SUV added $680 per month to their expenses. A year later, Christine replaced her vehicle as well. As their children moved into high school, new expenses appeared: private sports coaching, SAT tutoring, college campus visits. Then their oldest child was accepted to an out-of-state university. Rather than asking their son to choose a more affordable option, David and Christine took out a Parent Plus loan to cover the difference. Throughout their entire 40s, they never felt irresponsible. Every decision seemed logical at the time. By age 50, however, their retirement accounts held $240,000. That was only $55,000 more than they had saved 10 years earlier, despite a decade of income, contributions, and market growth. Finally, with their children becoming independent, David and Christine decided it was time to catch up. They maximized their retirement contributions. They saved aggressively. And by the time they reached 65, they had accumulated $685,000. At first, that number sounded impressive, until they ran the retirement projections. The results were sobering. Based on their spending and life expectancy, their savings would likely be exhausted by age 82. To avoid that outcome, they would need to sell their home, reduce their lifestyle significantly, or continue working well into their 70s. Now compare their story with another couple, Robert and Jennifer. At age 40, their financial situation looked almost identical. Their combined income was $155,000. Their retirement savings totaled $165,000, and they were raising 2 children, ages 11 and 8. Robert also believed it was time to upgrade to a larger home, but Jennifer strongly disagreed. She had read about how housing decisions affect long-term retirement outcomes. After several difficult conversations, they agreed to stay in their current home. At first, the decision felt like a sacrifice, but the seeing $650 per month they avoided spending went directly into their retirement accounts. Later, when Robert's car needed replacing, they chose a 3-year-old certified pre-owned vehicle instead of buying new. It wasn't flashy, but it worked perfectly. And more importantly, it kept their long-term financial plan intact. When the time for college arrived, Robert and Jennifer approached it differently. They sat down with their children and had honest conversations about the cost of education. Both kids ultimately chose state universities where they received merit scholarships. It wasn't always easy. Throughout their 40s, Robert and Jennifer often felt like they were moving against the current. Compared to their peers, their lifestyle appeared modest. While others upgraded homes, drove new luxury vehicles, and spent freely, they quietly kept their long-term plan in place. But the results began to show. By the time they reached 50, their retirement accounts had grown to $580,000. In just a decade, their savings had more than tripled, thanks to consistent investing and market growth. By 65, Robert and Jennifer had accumulated roughly $1.65 million. Their home was completely paid off. They could retire fully, travel wherever they wanted, and live comfortably without worrying about money. What's important here is this: the difference between these two families wasn't created by higher incomes or better investment skills. It came from the decisions they made during their 40s. And there's something even more surprising about these two stories. During their 40s, both families felt equally happy with their lives. Research consistently shows that lifestyle upgrades produce only temporary boosts in happiness. After about 18 to 24 months, people adjust to their new normal. The bigger house feels ordinary. The nicer car becomes just another car. The upgraded lifestyle quickly stops feeling special. In other words, David and Christine didn't actually enjoy their 40s more than Robert and Jennifer. They simply spent more money. That extra spending produced no lasting increase in happiness while permanently limiting the financial freedom of their later years. So what should you do with this information? It depends on where you currently are in life. If you're in your 20s or 30s, you have an incredible advantage. You now understand that your 40s will bring constant pressure to expand your lifestyle during your peak earning years. The best thing you can do right now is build the habits that will protect you later. Set up automatic retirement contributions that you never reduce. And decide what enough means for you before your income grows large enough to tempt you with excess. If you're approaching your 40s, you're standing at one of the most important financial turning points of your life. The choices you make over the next 10 years will likely determine whether your retirement is comfortable or stressful. Take a hard look at your major expenses. Is your home sized appropriately for your goals? Are your cars tools for transportation or symbols of status? And most importantly, are you funding your retirement before funding lifestyle upgrades? Because every dollar that flows into lifestyle expansion is a dollar that cannot compound for your future. If you're already in your late 40s and some of this story feels uncomfortably familiar, you still have time to change direction. Every additional percentage point you add to your savings rate now can improve your outcome. And you may need to consider choices that many of your peers would never entertain. Downsizing your home before retirement instead of after. Selling expensive vehicles. Or pursuing higher-paying career opportunities even if they require change. If you're already past your 40s with limited savings, the focus shifts to what you can still control. Delaying Social Security can significantly increase monthly benefits. Working a few additional years can dramatically strengthen your finances, and downsizing housing can release equity that supports retirement income. But underneath all of these decisions lies a deeper psychological challenge. The difficulty of financial discipline in your 40s often comes from a simple belief. After 2 decades of working, it feels like you've finally earned the right to enjoy your success, and that feeling is completely understandable. But the real question becomes this: when does the gratification actually arrive? Because this is where many people fall into a subtle trap. The pleasure created by lifestyle upgrades is temporary, but the financial consequences are permanent. The upgraded home feels exciting for a year or two, then it simply becomes the new normal, while quietly reducing your retirement savings for decades. The luxury car feels thrilling for a while, then it's just transportation, while permanently limiting your financial options. Real gratification isn't found in spending your peak earning years, it comes from turning those years into lifelong freedom. The person who resists lifestyle inflation during their 40s experiences a powerful reward later. Every day of retirement becomes calmer, more flexible, more secure. The person who expands their lifestyle too aggressively experiences the opposite. Every day of retirement becomes a series of financial calculations. The discipline of your 40s lasts about 10 years, but the reward can last 3 decades or more. The indulgence of your 40s might feel good for 2 or 3 years, but the consequences can follow you for the rest of your life. Now imagine yourself at 70 years old. You're sitting quietly on a porch or in a living room early in the morning. The house is calm. The day is just beginning. In one version of this future, your thoughts are peaceful. You're deciding which grandchild you might visit next month. You're planning a trip to a place you've always wanted to see. And unexpected expenses don't worry you, because your financial foundation is strong. But there's another version of that same future. In this version, your morning begins with a different kind of thought. You're checking whether this month's Social Security payment will be enough to cover your medications. You worry about what might happen if your car suddenly needs repairs. Unexpected expenses feel threatening, and the future feels uncertain, because your financial options are limited. Both of these futures begin the exact same way. Both versions of you made their key decisions decades earlier during the same 10-year window. And now both are simply living with the consequences of those choices. The difference between those two futures doesn't come down to luck. It isn't determined by talent. And it's not even determined primarily by income. The biggest difference comes from a series of decisions made between age 40 and 50. Decisions about housing, decisions about cars, decisions about education, career moves, and lifestyle choices. Each one may seem small in the moment, but just like money, those decisions compound over time. Your 40s will eventually pass. That decade moves forward whether you make intentional choices or simply follow the default path around you. Time doesn't pause while you decide. The only real question is this: which version of your 70-year-old self are you building right now? Because the person you become later in life is being shaped quietly by the choices you make during this decade. Your 40s determine far more than most people realize. But that reality shouldn't feel heavy. It shouldn't feel like pressure. It should feel like something else entirely. An opportunity. Because once you understand how powerful this decade really is, you gain the ability to shape the outcome. The next 10 years will pass either way. What those 10 years ultimately create is completely up to you.